Hello, my name is Samantha Brasher Godsey, and I am a programming specialist at the Auburn Public Library. Today, it is my great pleasure to present Budgeting 101, a webinar designed to provide you with the basic principles needed to create a unique, personalized, customizable budget based on your income, lifestyle, life stage, and financial goals. Now, before we get started, I want to make sure to let you know that this is not something that you can only do if you make a certain amount of money. There is no minimum income requirement for budgeting. There is no minimum age to start budgeting. You can budget your allowance money. You can budget when you are a high school or college student just getting started in making a little bit more money on a consistent basis, when you're just getting through school. Whether it's an hourly rate of pay, minimum wage, or a six-figure salary, budgeting can and should be for you. Because the beautiful thing about budgeting is that it puts you in control of your money so that hopefully you never feel like your money is in control of you. I love this quote by Ayn Rand because it really captures my budgeting philosophy in a perfect little nutshell. It says, money is only a tool. It will take you wherever you wish, but it will not replace you as the driver. And I think that is a critical point as we start the conversation about creating our own budgets. This quote really puts money in its proper context. Money is a tool, and we are in control of it. As long as we're willing to get into that driver's seat and do the work, money can be used for whatever we need it to be used for, to meet our physical needs, to achieve some of our immediate wants, but most importantly, to be able to reach our long-term financial goals. And by long-term, I might mean long-term as in a month from now, or it could mean 20 years from now. It really just depends on your life and what your goals are, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. But before we dive in any deeper, what I really want to try to get across to you is that as we start talking about budgeting and money, which is something that can make people nervous, make people uncomfortable, I don't want you to go into this process feeling like you're going to be on this super restrictive financial diet. Your budget should be as restrictive as it needs to be and you are comfortable with. Because if you make your budget just like a diet, so restrictive that you're never actually going to follow it, then it doesn't really serve its purpose at all. The best budget that you'll ever make is the one that you will follow. Budgeting, as an unknown author once said, isn't about limiting yourself. It's about making the things that excite you possible. So rather than thinking about how a budget will keep you from spending in the here and now, think about all the ways that budgeting is going to give you the freedom to be able to do more of the things that you really want to do most. So now let's jump into financial goal setting. What are your financial goals? This is a very important question to ask yourself. Your goals might be to get out of debt. That's a very common goal that a lot of us share. You might want to pay off credit cards, student loans, personal loans, pay off your house early, or pay off your vehicle. It is a great feeling to have a very large bill no longer be a reoccurring experience on your bank account. That is something that I've experienced and highly recommend. You could purchase a new home or vehicle, maybe your first home or first vehicle. Establish a college or emergency fund, save for retirement, or try to retire early. You could travel. Maybe you dream of traveling to a foreign country or multiple foreign countries by yourself. Or maybe you want to take your family on an epic trip to Disney World. Maybe you just want to experience greater financial freedom. You want to be able to go and buy something that you want in the moment without worrying whether or not you have enough money in the bank to do it, or whether or not you'll have enough money to cover your immediate needs if you do something that you want. All of these are completely valid reasons. And it's important to determine what your goals are to set them, to keep them, to put some sort of timeline on them in some cases, because they're going to significantly impact your budget. They're going to color your priorities and your decisions as you go through the budget making process. So that's why I wanted to start here, because I want you to be thinking about these as we go throughout the rest of the presentation. Now, the first step in creating a physical budget is to calculate your minimum monthly income. Now, this may seem completely self-explanatory, but in reality, one of the greatest sources of financial imbalance is simply a lack of familiarity with how much money is flowing in and out of your bank account every month. This may seem odd, but I'll be the first one to admit that when life gets really busy, the first thing that I fail to do is to check my bank account to make sure that my spending habits are doing what they need to be doing. And I am a person who's giving a Budgeting 101 webinar. So if I do it, then anyone can do it. So making sure that you are really aware of what your finances are doing and what you're doing with your finances is very much the first step to maintaining a healthy and sustainable budget. Step number 2 is to identify your essential expenses, your mortgage or rent, your utilities, groceries and household supplies, transportation costs, childcare, credit card, and or loan payments. But before we get into the details of those, I want to back up a little bit to that minimum monthly payment, because I really want to emphasize that word minimum. Because depending on your income, your job situation, what's minimum for you may be different than what's minimum for someone else. So for example, if you are a salaried employee, you might be able to consistently expect to make the same amount every single month, and you can base your budget on that number. However, if you are an hourly employee, maybe you get overtime periodically, or maybe you don't always get the full amount of your allotted hours. Maybe you're supposed to work 20 hours a week, but sometimes you get 18, sometimes you get 25. Then what you need to do to ensure that you have a solid step 1 complete for your budget is to go back and look at approximately 6 months of pay stubs or paychecks to see how much is the minimum amount that you know that you will be making every single month. So if you get paid twice a month, look at every paycheck from the past 3 to 6 months and determine what was the lowest paycheck you received during that time. If you get paid twice a month, multiply that lowest paycheck by 2, and that's your minimum monthly income. If you get paid monthly, look at that 6 months worth of paychecks or pay stubs and see what was the lowest amount that you made in the past 6 months. Whatever is the lowest amount is what you want to use as your baseline, your minimum monthly income, out of which you will take all of your expenses, both essential and non-essential. And that's for a very specific reason. So let's say over the course of a particular time period, you made $850 one week. Then you made $1,000. Then you made $1,250. Well, we all want to base our budget based on that $1,250 because it gives us more room to be able to buy and spend and do more things with our money. But realistically, if there's the possibility you might only make $850, then you need to make sure that everything in your budget will fit within that $850. Or if you get paid twice a month, that $850 times 2. If you base your budget on the lowest amount that you know you will be bringing home, then you'll always know that all of your essential expenses will be covered. And if you end up making that $1,000 or $1,250, then that's a bonus. That's extra money that you can put towards wants or your financial goals. But you never have to worry, if you always budget for the minimum amount, that the key things will be covered. And that's why I strongly encourage you to base your budget on the lowest amount you know you will bring home. Now, this amount may vary if you share your home with a spouse or a partner who pool their income with yours. Now, you may not do that just because you have a spouse or a partner. You may keep things separate financially. There's no right or wrong way to go about doing this. But if you do share a home with a spouse, partner, or roommate, it is important to talk about how you're going to divide your expenses. That way, you know, as you're sitting down to do your budget, what you need to know to expect to pay every single month so that you never have any financial surprises. Whether that is splitting your expenses right down the middle, half of everything, or splitting it up, half of rent, but I cover electric, you cover the cost of water and sewer. Whatever works for you is fine, but you need to know those expectations right off the bat when you're creating a budget. That way, there's no confusion going forward. So, back to essential expenses. We talked about housing costs. That is the thing that I always put as the very first line because it's often the biggest expense that you'll have during any particular pay period or any particular month. The cost of your mortgage or your rent is something that doesn't vary from month to month unless you move to a new home or move to a new apartment, townhome, etc. So you know exactly how much to expect to spend, and that's a really important one. That's one that you need to go ahead and make sure that everything else comes after because you got to have a roof over your head. Now, there's also utilities. So we need to think about electric, water and sewer, trash and recycling, for example. Now, depending on your living situation, if you live with a parent or in a dormitory, or you have a roommate and you rent a home or an apartment together, some of these may be covered by your landlord, whether your landlord is your parent, your landlord is your school, or your landlord is, well, a traditional landlord. If you own your own home, then you're responsible for everything, of course. So that's something to bear in mind too, just making sure that you know before you commit to a particular living situation exactly how much you're going to be expected to pay yourself. Next is groceries and household supplies, and you might notice that there's a little asterisk at the end of this heading. And that's because groceries and household supplies, while absolutely essential, there's a little bit of control that you can exert over how much you spend in this area. Of course, depending on your household size, it's naturally going to go up or down the amount that you need to budget for this. And the best way to gauge how much you need to budget for things like groceries, household supplies, and the cost of fuel if you have a vehicle is based on your history. So if you go into your bank account and you look at your history of how much you're spending monthly on your groceries, on fuel, that's a pretty good way to gauge how much you need to budget and expect so that if you find that over the course of the past 3 months, you have consistently spent $250 a month on groceries, don't immediately start out budgeting $150. Budget $250 and then practice some smart shopping strategies like buying generic, using digital coupons at various grocery stores, and shopping the sales ad to see if you can lower that number. But don't be unrealistic and say, well, I always spend $300 or I always spend $450, but I'm going to, because I've started budgeting, immediately slash that number. No, it's best to start out realistic and then try some things. And if after several months you notice that you have, on average, reduced the amount of spending in that category, then that's awesome. You can lower that number on your budget. But try to be as realistic as possible about this number. But remember that you do have control over it. If you eat out more, then you save on groceries. But in the end, you really end up spending more because eating out comes at a premium. So the more you can eat at home, the more you will save. And you do have a little bit more control over the cost of the food that you consume that way. Now we need to talk about transportation. Whether you own your own vehicle and you have vehicle payments and or insurance and the cost of fuel, or if you use public transportation, ride your bike or commute, that is something that needs to be factored in because in order to make money, we usually have to get to somewhere where we make the money, whether that is a school or a library or any other place of business. We have to be able to get there in order to have the money to do all the other things that we need to do throughout our life. So you can control this a little bit if you commute with a spouse, partner, coworker, or friend. That will reduce the amount of fuel that you consume, which is why it has a little asterisk on there. But regardless of whether or not you're driving your own vehicle, riding with a friend, or taking public transportation, that's a factor that you need to keep in mind as an essential expense. Of course, there's also the cost of childcare, which not everyone will obviously have to factor into their budget. But if you do have children, whether they live at home with you or not, that's something that you're going to need to factor into your essential expenses, whether that's the cost of daycare, babysitters, nannies, or potentially even child support if you don't have child support automatically deducted from your paychecks every month. You need to go ahead and make sure that those are expected essential expenses in your budget. Last but not least, credit card and or loan payments. At this point, I want to point out that I am not a financial expert or official advisor. I am simply someone who is passionate about helping people become more financially literate. So I am not biased one way or the other on whether or not you should or should not have credit cards or loans of any kind. That is a personal choice that you need to consider very seriously. What I can tell you is that if you do have them or you decide to have them, you need to be prepared to treat those payments as an essential expense, and you shouldn't expect the amount that you borrowed to be the exact amount that you pay back. Inevitably, with every credit card and or loan, there will come a point, even after introductory offer periods and grace periods, which often abound in order to kind of encourage you to take advantage of these things, you will have to pay interest on the amount that's left. And if you're only ever making minimum payments, you're going to have to pay a lot more interest. Hence the asterisk at the end, because we're going to talk about trying to be a little more aggressive in paying some of this off as we move further into this presentation. But for right now, consider the minimum payment on any credit cards and loan payments to be essential expenses that you factor in every time you sit down to update your budget. So now we get to actually see our expenses on a page. The question is, what kind of page do you want to see your expenses and your income reflected on? So you have three main options. Probably the most popular and user-friendly option for the majority, not all, but the majority, is a spreadsheet, which you can use in Excel or a similar program. Now, Excel and other similar programs have lots of templates that you can utilize to do your budgets. I'm also going to, at the end of this presentation, tell you how you can get a template that I have created, a very simple budgeting template that you can use. It's an Excel spreadsheet that you can plug your income and your expenses into, and it will do a lot of the math for you, take a lot of the guesswork out of computing how much money you have left at the end of the month. But a spreadsheet is a great, really organized way to keep up with your budget. And one of the reasons I like it so much is because you can use formulas to do so much of the math for you and make it quicker and more efficient. Because as I believe I have said before, the best budget you'll ever have is one that you will use, one that you will keep. So if it's easier, you're more likely to keep up with it. And that is essential. But some people hear spreadsheet or Excel or a similar program name and they get really nervous because they are sure that they will not be able to use this particular program. And that's a valid concern because not everyone is comfortable with that. And if it's going to take you a really long time even to figure out how to use the program, that may not be the best option for you. Because again, you want the budget you'll actually use. Which is why I also have an option for you for downloading a worksheet that you'll be able to physically write down all of your income details and expense details and manually calculate how much is left at the end of the month. So that's another really good option. And for some people, it's really convenient to be able to write down because sometimes our brains respond better to writing something down. We'll remember it better. And you can also take a physical worksheet and put it on your refrigerator door so that you remember throughout the day or throughout the week how much of your money you have left to spend on various things. You can even put it on your front door so that you see it every time you go out to go spend some money. This is how much I have left. These are what my financial goals are. So that's one really nice thing about a worksheet as well. If you are more tech savvy, tech literate, and you really love a good application on your phone or your tablet or your desktop computer, then there are numerous apps that you can take advantage of that will do a lot of the work for you. Many of them will also help you calculate what has and has not been paid, remind you of when things are due by logging into your various utilities and bank accounts and keeping a manual record of that for you, or I should say an automatic record of that for you. There's definitely going to still be some setup, and no program is perfect. But look at these different options and determine which works best for you. In a pinch, if you're not comfortable with any of these three, a notebook and a pen or pencil will absolutely work. I can't tell you how many years I kept up with my budget with a calculator, a notebook, and a pen and a pencil until I finally switched to a spreadsheet because I felt comfortable doing that. But it worked for me, and it gave me a physical record of how my budget and my spending changed throughout the years. The important thing is building your physical budget in a format that you feel comfortable with and know that you'll be able to maintain. Now let's jump into miscellaneous spending and identifying recurring non-essential expenses. These are the things that can be variable, that are not essential, but that also need to be recorded in your budget after you've determined how much money you have left once all of your essential expenses have been covered. So this category includes, for example, subscriptions to streaming services, your Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, HBO Max, and money spent on eating out, shopping, getting your hair and your nails done, going to play a round of golf, hunting, whatever your hobby is. If there's a financial element to it, that falls within this category. You may also include expenses with variable costs that you may or may not consider essential depending on your lifestyle, such as your internet, your cell phone, your clothes and shoes, and your vehicle maintenance. So if you don't have a vehicle, you don't have to factor anything in as far as vehicle maintenance is concerned. But we all need clothes and shoes to wear, but we don't all necessarily need to buy clothes and shoes every single month. Maybe that is a form of self-care for you and therefore a priority. And so you make that a identifiable recurring non-essential expense. You give it its own budget line. Maybe you primarily shop once or twice a year to replenish your children's wardrobes for the new school year. So then you will factor those specific expenses in once or twice a year. Maybe put a little bit towards it throughout the year, but you know that this is when you're going to be really doing a lot of miscellaneous spending, and you budget for that. Your internet and your phone, those, while it could be argued, are essential. The amount of data, the speed of your internet, those vary depending on what your needs are. If you work from home or you're a full-time student, you probably need a high-speed internet connection, which of course is going to cost the highest amount. If you have a cell phone, depending on your lifestyle and your circumstances, you might be able to get a prepaid phone with a set amount of data and minutes, and that's completely fine for you. Or if you're like me and you tend to destroy phones unintentionally by dropping them on a regular basis, you might need to keep a phone plan that costs a little bit more but ensures that you have insurance when inevitably something goes wrong. So based on your lifestyle, you're going to identify what are your recurring non-essential expenses. And if you're not sure because you really are kind of out of touch with what you're spending and what you're not, the best way to find out is by either keeping a log of it for a month and really looking at, okay, what did I spend my money on and where? Or simply logging into your bank account and tracking your spending history that way, because usually they'll let you see up to 3 months at a time. And you'll be able to pretty quickly get a feel for where your money's going and what your financial priorities have been. Which brings me to our next subject, which is determining what your financial priorities are. Because at this point, we need to go back to our financial goals a little bit and do a little reflection and ask ourselves, does our miscellaneous spending support or undermine what we are trying to ultimately accomplish? Because there's a very real possibility that you are going to sit down and write out your budget with all of your miscellaneous non-essential expenses and find, much to your unhappiness and stress, that not everything fits in your budget, or it doesn't fit in a way that makes you feel good about your budget. Maybe you have nothing left at the end of the month, or you have so little left that you can't do anything to further your financial goals. Or maybe you have negative money left if you do everything that you've been doing based on, remember, that minimum income that you know will be coming in every month. It's at that point that we have to start making some tough decisions. And again, reflect on those financial goals and decide what's really important to us. Is getting our hair done twice a month the most important thing to us? Is that something that we need to do? If that for you is really important, if you need to do that for your job, if you need to do that because that's your form of self-care and that's a priority, then that's fine. Identify that as a semi-essential expense and make that a recurring thing in your budget. But then realize that if you choose that as a priority, then something else has to become not as much of a priority. So, this is where your budget really has to start reflecting the lifestyle that you want to maintain and the financial goals that you're trying to accomplish. So this is where the decision making comes into play. And I can't give you the answers on how to do this. This is something that's really personal and you have to figure out for yourself. But once everything's on a page, I find it's a lot easier to answer these questions for myself. When I see everything in black and white or whatever color you want to format your budget in, it helps me to be able to reflect and say, okay, if my goal is to not have that big payment every single month, then I could probably eat at home a little bit more often. I could probably go shopping a little bit less. Give yourself the freedom to do the things you want to do, but with a budget around them. That way, when you go and get your hair done, you know how much you're going to spend and you have the freedom to spend it because it's in your budget. But you know you do have a budget. So you get it done once, not 2 or 3 times. You go shopping. You tell yourself, I have $50 to spend on miscellaneous clothes and shoes and accessories this month. And you spend $50. You get things that you love, and you'll immediately see yourself starting to prioritize items and not shopping quite as mindlessly as we often do. You'll buy the things that matter most to you. You'll spend your money more wisely when you know you have a little bit of a limit on it, more often than not. So again, it's not about limiting yourself. It's about providing yourself with freedom to do the things you want to do and also reach your financial goals. It's about finding that balance, that healthy balance of meeting your needs always, getting some of your wants now, and making sure that you can pursue the goals that really matter to you in the future. Which leads us to the final calculations. You need to subtract all of your miscellaneous non-essential expenses from your remaining available income. Remember, after all of those essentials have been taken out. And then whatever's left, now you have a couple different options. You can establish or maintain an emergency fund, which I highly recommend. Maintaining and establishing an emergency fund will provide you with so much more financial freedom when life inevitably goes a little bit sideways. Life is full of surprises, and many of you listening to this will have already figured that out. Some of you may still be learning that. But let me assure you that sometimes things just don't go as planned. As an example, I like to share my experience of having my car's air conditioner go out in the dead middle of an Alabama summer 2 years in a row. Same car, 2 years in a row. The first year, I had to wait because I did not have enough money in my emergency fund to cover that big of a cost. And it was a very miserable summer. The second summer, I had enough in my emergency fund to cover the cost of repairing my vehicle immediately. So, as much as I was not happy about having to pay to repair something 2 years in a row, I was delighted to have my air conditioner back in a timely fashion. And that's just one example of things that can go wrong that you never see coming. My mechanical issue was something that I could technically live with, but it might be something that you can't. I've also had my transmission go out in the middle of the highway at a red light. I've had my septic tank back into my house, which, if you are a homeowner, you know is something that you cannot wait to fix. And if you do not have a landlord, you have to cover yourself. I've had hot water heaters go out. I've had financial difficulties with school, unexpected medical expenses. The list is unfortunately endless, but no need to panic when you hear this. What you should be hearing is that an emergency fund will provide you with some anxiety proof income to cover all the many things that could, might not, but something will happen. So that may be putting an extra $100 a month in your savings. Depending on your financial situation, it may be significantly less or significantly more. But working towards having an emergency fund is always a good idea. How much should your emergency fund be? At this point, I want to remind you that I am not a financial expert. This really is a personal decision based on your lifestyle and your income. For example, one of the things that I have often heard is that it is a good idea to have at least 2 months of your minimum income saved up, minimum household income, if you do, in fact, share a house with a spouse, partner, or potentially roommate. That way, you know that at the minimum, if something were to go catastrophically wrong, like you were to lose a job or become injured and unable to work, you have all of your essential expenses covered until you're able to recover in a way that will be providing you with more or additional income. So that's just one suggestion of how to use that extra money that's left over after all the essential and non-essential expenses have been subtracted from your income. Another option is to prioritize usage of remaining available income based on your financial goals. This is where we get back to those making the bigger payments on the credit cards and loan payments. This is your opportunity to, if you are trying to get out of debt, be a lot more aggressive in your payments. Pay well beyond the minimum payment, especially on the credit cards or loans with the highest interest rate, which you can find out by going back and looking at your credit card or loan agreements. Whichever one has the highest interest rate or maybe the highest balance, pay that one off as quickly as you can when you have the extra money to do so. And you'll end up paying a lot less as you go on. But maybe getting out of debt is not your priority. Maybe you don't have any debt at all. Maybe your priority is saving for a special trip, like we discussed, or for retirement. That's where you get into options of investing and saving and using that extra money, however much is left, to be able to reach those financial goals. Depending on your financial goal, the amount and how you save it or invest it is going to vary. But whatever's left is yours to be able to use to get what you want for future you. So that is a really exciting point to me in budgeting, is when you see what's left and you get to start doing things that really make you feel like I have accomplished something. Your needs haven't just been met, your immediate needs and wants haven't just been satisfied, but now you get to do something for future you. And that is a really great feeling. Now, I'd like to finish with another quote that I love that, again, really encapsulates my budgeting philosophy. And it's that the secret to budgeting is that it needs to be honest, not what you think it should be or wish it could be, but what it really is. You may have noticed that throughout this presentation, I haven't given you a lot of perfect percentages of how much you should spend on your needs versus your wants or your savings or investments. Because while those may work great for a lot of people, I don't feel like they're really inclusive of all our different life experiences, life stages, and income levels. But budgets are. There isn't a perfect budget, but there is a perfect budget for you. And that should evolve throughout your life. You may not be in a stage of life where you can aggressively work towards your financial goals. Maybe you're at a stage in life where you just need to make sure your bills are getting paid and that you're not getting into more debt. That's a very real place to be. And it's okay to be honest with yourself about that. That is not a shameful thing. It's an exciting thing because it means that you recognize the problem and you're here, you're listening, you're doing something about it. So, a hand clap to you for being here and listening and getting started on this process. Make your budget honest. Be honest with yourself about what your financial goals and priorities are. And happy budgeting, everyone. I'm very thankful that I got to share this with you today. And I hope that you learned something that you will continue to apply throughout the rest of your budgeting life. For any further questions, and also to find out how to download the budgeting template, both the spreadsheet and the worksheet, please contact libraryevents@auburnalabama.org. I look forward to hearing from you, and happy budgeting to each and every one of you. Good luck and have a wonderful rest of your day.